Greetings and welcome to a Prayerful Pause. My name is Nancy Woodworth-Hill, and amongst other things, I am a spiritual director. Today we will look at a narrative process for forgiveness. I'll present a structural process another time. So this work is based on that of my mentor, the Reverend Dr. Rob C. Voyle. Speaking about forgiveness is often quite a challenge. And it's important to come to a good understanding of what forgiveness is. So here's mine. To forgive is to let go of a harmful impact someone has had on your life in the past as you live in the present and move into your future. Here's some key ideas to keep in mind about forgiveness. So it's what one does for oneself. It is independent of reconciliation, which is the process of reestablishing relationship. Although Jesus demanded forgiveness, it's in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, he said actually no such thing about reconciliation. It's important to remember. The phrase forgive and forget is absolute rubbish. One wants to forgive and remember, so not to repeat a harmful situation. Forgiveness affirms that the behavior was indeed inappropriate or wrong. It's not a claim that the behavior was acceptable, nor is it a claim that you are somehow weak for engaging in the process of forgiveness. In my opinion, it's quite a strong thing to do and courageous. Forgiveness is always a choice, not a feeling, although feelings may accompany it. Forgiveness is often hindered by objections from some part of oneself, and this is critical to be aware of. It is absolutely important to satisfy these objections rather than to push them away, stamp on them, ignore them. So it's important to satisfy these objections in order to have the act of forgiveness remain in the past and not continually need to go back to it. Objections must be satisfied, no matter how small or trivial it seems. And most objections have something to do with safety or justice. Note that resentment will not provide safety. So it's actually physically and emotionally costly to hold a grudge. As for justice objections, resentment is always ineffective to achieve the goals. So common objections are, I won't be able to let everyone know what was done. Or, the hurt won't matter. Or, they'll do it again. Or they need to be punished. There are others as well. So the key is to understand what the objection is, and then perhaps ask how long the resentment has been held and how effective it's been. For many people, it can be years and years and years. And this often helps a person to get over that hurdle. Or, for instance, to ask how many billboards would be necessary to tell the world what has been done. I can laugh and realize it's impossible. It's easier to let go. And forgiveness requires that we change our narrative from that of victim. So this is a story, something happened to me. And we need to change the victim story to a survivor story. How I survived. I think it's from the French to float above. How I floated above a situation. Who now thrives. How I have moved beyond the event. These last two are sure signs of healing. And forgiveness is associated with resentments towards others, towards oneself, and toward God. At which point one needs to clarify what image of God one is resenting. In my opinion, there are a number of images of God which are inappropriate. there are deeper, clearer images. So it's worth exploring. Appropriate goals for forgiveness are several. To remember an incident without distress and not to relive it. Here we go into the arena of trauma. Another goal is to clarify and honor one's values as ways one prefers to live in the world now and into the future. And 3, to behold and act compassionately towards others, including those who have offended you. I have done another video on the 3 faces of compassion. This may be worth looking at here, but compassion is not always tenderness, but the ability to speak a truth appropriately. Note, it is never, ever appropriate to demand forgiveness in a setting in which one is still being hurt. So for an example, if someone is in the process of being physically abused, it is inappropriate to ask them to forgive the abuser. One needs to be removed from certain situations in order to enter into this process. So let's take a look at a practice. First, center yourself. If you do that with a breath practice or however you do, center yourself and allow God's unconditional love to surround you. It's always there, so you're actually allowing yourself to feel this love. Let this love surround you and uphold you. Nothing can remove it. It is there. Now, identify a current demand you have about what should or shouldn't have happened in the past. This is critical. Take some time, identify that demand. Now, rewrite that demand into a preference. So for instance, if I didn't feel listened to, my demand was the person listened to me. My preference is I would have preferred that I was listened to. So does it represent a value that you want to keep? This preference. Now, it's time to seek and satisfy objections to forgiving. What part of you objects to setting a person free from your preference and surrendering them into unconditional love of God to take responsibility for their life, free from your demands? Let me say that again. Seek and satisfy your objections to forgiving. What part of you objects to setting the person free from your preferences and surrendering them into the unconditional love that surrounds the universe and upholds the universe so that they can take responsibility for their life free from your demands? This is the core of the process of letting go. So in your imagination, release that person from your demand. You can say, I would have preferred that you would have listened to me. I release you from my demand that in the past that you didn't listen to me. I would have preferred that you would have done whatever you've identified, and I release you from my demand that in the past you did or didn't do something. Now, return to your place of being in God's unconditional love. Let your awareness of that grow, allowing it to surround you and uphold you and the person that you have forgiven. And they don't need to be right there next to you. You can place them wherever you would like. Wish them well, whatever that means. And return to the place of God's love and see this love flowing into your future. Recall the person and see if you can feel the resentment you began with. If so, we'll return to the 4th, 5th, and 6th steps. So that's to seek and satisfy objections to forgiving. What part of you objects to setting the person free from your preference and surrendering them into this unconditional love to take responsibility for their life, free from your demands? And once you've sought the objections you have in your imagination, release them from your demand. So I would have preferred that you would have done X, Y, or Z. I release you from my demand that in the past you did or didn't X, Y, or Z. Then return to that place of being aware of God's unconditional love. Feel it surrounding you, upholding you, and let the person you've forgiven be held also in this love. Wish them well, whatever that means. And return to the place of God's love and see it flowing into your future. And then you can recall the person and see if you can feel the resentment you began with. If so, check for additional objections and satisfy them. I want to note that this process works for many people. I have seen it work for years-long resentments with others. There are individuals who just can't do the imaginational work to do this. So be gentle with yourself, and perhaps you will find other ways to enter into a state of forgiveness. If you have found this video helpful, please consider sharing it. Go in peace.